Welcome to Bottom Up, a monthly podcast dedicated to issues and topics of interest to young lawyers in Wisconsin and beyond. I'm Emil Ovbiagele.
And I'm Kristen Hardy, and we're your hosts. This is the Bottom Up Podcast. Welcome to another episode of Bottom Up. I am one of your hosts, Kristen Hardy, and I'm joined with our other host,
Emil Ovbiagele. What's up, Kristen? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm a very long time no see.
Yeah, that's not true, but how's your summer going?
You just pretend like it is. Summer's been okay. Can't complain. Can't believe it's July already.
Isn't that crazy?
That is wild.
We had a good, fun-filled weekend, though. We're recording this. It's July, and we just got done with, the Harley Festival? Bastille Days.
You enjoyed that?
I did not go, but I went to Bastille Days. There were Garfield Days in my neighborhood. We did a brunch with my organization, Bunch of Professionals. So just a lot of fun stuff.
You know what? I've never gotten an invitation.
It's for women.
I feel very left out.
It's for women
and
those who identify as women.
And, eat good food.
Natalie can come.
It's not in the name. It's called Brunch for Professionals.
Brunch of
Professionals.
Right.
So how am I supposed to know? I almost bought tickets. I was like, just to troll you guys. Just buy 5 tickets and not show up.
You wouldn't be the first person who just showed up. So that wouldn't have been out of the ordinary. But that's enough about our summer plans and all of the fun things we've been doing in Milwaukee. Let's talk about today's episode and introduce our guests. So today we're tackling a topic that is sure to resonate with many of our listeners, and that's navigating new opportunities and situations while exuding confidence, which is a tough thing to do in the legal field. So many of us have found ourselves in new circumstances for a variety of reasons. Think about entering the practice of law for the first time, picking a new job, picking a new city, joining a new volunteer board, deciding to become the NBA president like you, Emil. So it's been tough. We make these transitions look easy, but we know they aren't always easy. So how do you do these things, especially with confidence? How do you pick a new practice area? How do you ascend to a leadership position? How do you achieve work-life balance, which we've talked about in depth on this podcast in the past? And I think today's guest is very well versed in finding her footing in the legal community. So with that, I'm super excited to introduce Christa Wittenberg to the Bottom Up Podcast. Hi, Christa.
Hi, Kristen.
Welcome, Kristen.
How are you?
Good, thanks. Thank you both for having me.
Of course. So let's intro this. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where'd you go to school? How'd you get to Milwaukee?
Sure. So I am currently a shareholder at O'Neill Cannon, a mid-sized law firm based here in Milwaukee. Working backwards from there, I clerked for a federal judge for 2 years right out of law school. That was in Peoria, Illinois, and I went to law school at the University of Michigan.
Okay. Where are you from originally, Christa?
I have lived many places.
Okay.
The longest I lived any place is in this area for the last 9 years.
Okay.
But I went to high school in western Racine County, a rural area down there.
Okay.
My parents are still there, so it's the closest I have to a hometown.
Okay.
So all in Wisconsin?
No, born in Kansas, lived in Minnesota for a while, law school in Michigan, lived in Illinois for a while.
Nice.
So you're like
some time
me.
in California. I like to move around.
Yeah, Midwest born and bred though, so I get it. Okay. So what is your current practice area?
I do commercial litigation.
Okay.
And I focus especially on disputes, usually broken down business relationships, either a contract with an ongoing relationship or business owners fighting over a business are kind of my most common practice areas.
Business divorce.
Yep, exactly.
That's what I tell business divorce.
How long have
very similar.
you been at the firm?
I've been at the firm for 9 years.
Okay, firm for 9 years. Did you work at any firm, or you clerked, or you went right to the firm?
I went straight from my clerkship with the federal judge and then had a little break in between not working and then working for the firm.
Okay. So your private practice experience is
One
all
shop.
with this firm. Okay. So let's think about, I'm going to talk a little bit more about where you currently are in your career, but before we jump to that, if you think about when you were in law school, you're at the University of Michigan trying to figure out what you want to do, how does that compare or match up to what you're currently doing? Is this where you saw yourself at this point in your career?
It is worlds apart different.
Okay.
I never once thought I would work for a law firm in my life. I went to law school like many young people do, imagining they want to go out and save the world.
Not Kristen. No, Kristen is never
Maybe not Kristen.
about that.
It's not true. Oh my
Very
goodness.
honest about that in law school. I'm sorry.
I had the goal of working for legal aid or working for the government, really making the world a better place. And I admire people that do those things. And all through law school, I had every intention of doing that. I had summer internships with nonprofits that I loved, including one at the Legal Society of Milwaukee, actually. And then towards the end of law school, I got my clerkship working for a federal judge. It was a fantastic experience. And then I started applying to government and nonprofit organizations. And at the end of my clerkship, I had a tentative possible position in a federal government role and expected to take that position. It was going to be here in Milwaukee, so closer to my parents. And due to a hiring freeze, that fell through. So here I was in August, after 2 years of clerking for a federal judge, thinking I had something lined up. It did not pan out. So then I start thinking, what am I going to do next? And for a while, I just waited, hoping that maybe the hiring freeze would end. But I got to a point where I thought, I can't have a gap in my resume that's that long. And so I need to do something. So I started applying much more broadly. And I applied at many law firms, actually, and this was the firm that had a position. They actually worked me into the litigation team, and I took it thinking, I'll just try it. I'll see if I like it. And if I don't like it, I can just quit. And here I am 9 years later and haven't looked back.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Hi, Russell Nicolay here with Nicolay Law, Accident and Injury Lawyers. If you have clients that have been injured, my office would love the opportunity to help them get compensated and get their life back on track. We handle referrals and co-counsel relationships on injury cases all across Wisconsin.
Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up Podcast.
Well, what year was that hiring freeze?
That would have been 2014.
Because that was around the exact. I had a similar story. I was going to work at the DA's office initially, and there was a hiring freeze. I think during Scott Walker's time, and they had us, at least they told us to go work as special counsel, and that's just code word for free. Hey, go do it for free. And then, I told him, I can't call my mom and be like, I just graduated law school. Can you spot me for another 6 months because I don't have a job? It's just funny how those hiring freezes tend to change the course of your life.
Absolutely.
So I want to talk about your current new nomination in this management role at your mid-sized law firm.
Ooh. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
This is awesome, and we're going to let Christa tell us a little bit more about what that looks like. But this kind of came about, I really wanted Christa on the podcast because we've worked together in the past on some volunteer boards, but especially when she told me about the structure, because I personally did not know it existed. Goes to show you how much I know about law firms. So it's like, tell me more. What is that exactly?
That's because you've chosen to not care about what
that is
us
not true. No, your firm is not
Dude.
structured this way either. I just didn't know. And I think a lot of people may not know. A lot of lawyers, a lot of our listeners don't know about this. So explain to me your firm structure and talk about this new management role that you have taken on.
Sure, absolutely. My law firm is an S.C. corporation, and we have 40 attorneys, roughly, kind of give or take at any given time. And we have about 21 shareholders right now, and the rest are a mix of associates and of counsel type roles. And it's a corporation, and so we have a board of directors, and the board is made up of 3 people, and they're all shareholders of the firm. Once you get to a firm of our size, I think it'd be unwieldy for all of the shareholders to be involved in the management of the firm, which I think is why it makes sense to have a smaller board that handles most of the management decisions and most of the management work, so that it's not 21 heads, it's 3 heads coming together to try to make the best decisions on behalf of the organization.
So when you say management, because it's only 3 of you, right?
Right.
What does that mean? That those are the firm's operations? Is that HR, finances? What exactly does management mean in that context?
All of those things and more.
Okay.
So we ultimately, every decision that's a big decision on behalf of the firm is made by the board.
Okay.
And that includes hiring decisions. It includes compensation decisions. It includes budgeting. It includes monitoring the financials. It includes most of the day-to-day work that is important enough and significant enough and meaningful enough to come up to the board of directors.
And because that team is so small, I imagine you don't really have committees. You just are all talking about it together.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. And within that, of course, we delegate work where appropriate. For example, we have 2 attorneys that are not on the board who do fantastic work running our summer program. They've been doing a great job working with our summer associates, and that helps very much for them to be doing that and not the board running that program.
Understood. So my friends who are listening in in-house land, if you're at a publicly traded company, this makes a lot of sense. That's exactly how they're usually structured. There's a board of directors. Maybe the CEO is the president and CEO and leads the board. But for the most part, usually the board members they don't work at the company with the exception of the CEO. So that makes a lot of sense. That's how I'm putting this in my head. Like, okay, I understand that structure. So you are also, which you did mention, the first woman in the firm's, is it 50-year history?
50 years, yep.
How does that feel?
You know, it feels great. Mm-hmm. I'm very excited. I would say it feels like a really good time to be taking that position on. I feel like the firm is ready for it. And I will say this, in the firm's history of 50 years, there have been very few board members. So the person who stepped down when I stepped up to the board had been on the board for, I think, about 30 years. So the longevity of these attorneys that have been serving in these roles is one reason why it has been only men. It's because this firm, when it was founded, and since then, has had a heavily male leadership. And so that has changed over time, and we're really proud of it. We're really proud to have a number of fantastic female attorneys. We have attorneys of color that we're very proud of as well. And it's been important to me personally to have a firm that's really inclusive of all people. And it feels great to be a part of that and keep that trend in the right direction.
That's awesome.
What experiences from your past have you surprisingly leaned on in assisting with the new role?
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Did you know that Milwaukee's legal community has a serious problem? Law firm associate attrition rates are 33% higher for racial minorities than for white lawyers. And while 20% of students at each of our 2 Wisconsin law schools are identified as people of color, only 4% of large firm partners in Milwaukee are identified as minorities, and only 0.6% are African American. While women make up roughly half of all entering law students, only 25% of large firm partners in Milwaukee are women. Despite decades of focus, attention, and investment, there is a persistent lack of diversity in the legal profession. The DEI Hackathon was brought to life by leaders in Milwaukee's legal community who want to see that change. So what's a hackathon? A hackathon is an event during which people unite to engage in collaborative, team-based problem solving. Picture teams of lawyers entering a Shark Tank-like competition to devise great ideas for positively impacting diverse lawyers, recruiting and retention in our community, and pitching their ideas at a fun event judged by well-known local legal dignitaries. The winning ideas win seed money for implementation, but the legal community will be the big winner. Sign up a team now. You and your team will learn everything you need to know during the kickoff event on September 14, 2023, and you'll have plenty of time to work on your idea before the pitch contest on October 30th. Your firm or organization can also sponsor the hackathon, increasing the funding available to the winners to develop their ideas. Register and look for sponsorship information on our hackathon website at www.mkebarfoundation.org and click the DEI Hackathon tab. The hackathon is brought to you in partnership with the Milwaukee Bar Foundation, the State Bar of Wisconsin, the Association for Women Lawyers, and the Wisconsin Association of African American Lawyers.
Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up podcast.
Oh, that's a great question. You know, whenever anyone says that, they mean that's a really tough question. I'm just buying time.
That's fine. Or put another way, you know, I can imagine that there have been times where you're faced with either a hard decision or just a lot of work, and you're like, you know, thank God I went through this, or thank God that happened in the past because I know exactly what to do in this situation. And that's never occurred. That's okay too.
Yeah, I would say I've not had any of those moments yet, but I like to think that one thing I bring to the table is I like to think I have really good common sense.
Okay.
And I try really, really hard to be fair. And at the end of the day, that's what I think good leadership is about.
Can I guess and just maybe suggest one?
Absolutely.
The fact that you deal a lot with a lot of business divorces. Like you get to see where things come to a head.
Yeah.
So you can prevent it.
Exactly. When you see how things go wrong, it really helps to make things go better. And to appreciate that we have a fantastic firm with great people, and to not lose sight of that, even if there are some little things that come up here and there.
See, I won't charge you for that one.
So another question, and you don't have to get really granular, but I'm curious, you're a shareholder and you pay some money to be a shareholder within the firm. So is it extra? Is this an extra job with extra pay? Is it an extra job that you have to pay into to have it? You can answer that question as high level as you like to.
Sure. So our firm does have a buy-in for a shareholder position, and to be on the board, I did not have to pay any extra.
Okay.
Thank goodness. And it is the way our firm works. We have a subjective compensation system for our shareholders, and we take into account not just the billable work, not just the production, not just how much people are paying for the hours you spent doing client work. And so because of that, there is room in the compensation structure to recognize people who have served in non-billable ways. And so theoretically, I suppose I may have some compensation boost as a result of it, but it's not anything direct. This is because I love the firm and wanted to make it a great place to be.
Understood. So what are some anticipated challenges? Have you started the role?
I have, yes, as of July 1st.
Okay, July 1, so a couple of weeks ago.
17 days in.
Maybe what are some challenges you are already seeing, or some challenges you anticipate with this new position?
One thing that I know a lot of firms are struggling with or grappling with at this era of life is work and what that looks like in terms of where people work and how people work, what the workplace looks like. Obviously, with the COVID pandemic, there was a big shakeup in office space, in working remotely, in how to form teams when we were working remotely. My firm has largely been in person since pretty soon after the lockdown phase of the pandemic. And our firm thrives on a good workplace culture. And so it's important to us that we have people around to help mentor younger attorneys. We have people around to answer questions and just a positive environment overall. So with that, fortunately, we have had most attorneys there most days, and people want to be in person generally. We're flexible. We have flexibility for our attorneys because we respect them as professionals. But I think that that's going to be a continually evolving issue that there are no easy answers for.
Well, what does the future of work in our profession look like for you, for firms?
That's a really tough one because I think it's evolving. I know one of your previous guests predicted that perhaps the billable hour would be gone in her lifetime. I think of the billable hour much like democracy. They say it's the worst system except for all the rest. Mm-hmm. And I know it's not perfect, but I don't know if that's a likely evolution, but that'd be interesting. I don't know. One thing about our firm is we've gone pretty heavily all in on our firm and being a place people want to be by expanding in the last year. Most places are considering downsizing, and we took some extra space in a different floor, and we expanded our conference rooms and our meeting spaces because we wanted to invest in our people and have some in-person support at our firm.
But I think there's an important caveat, right? You said we wanted to invest in our people, and there are two aspects to that sentence, right? We meaning the firm making a decision as to what investment in their people looks like. Because when I think about this conversation, and we talk about this a lot on the show, there is this either or mantra, and I think that's the wrong way to look at it. It will be a competition of ideas with each firm deciding what their culture and what investing in their people looks like. For some companies, it might be investing in more work from home connections, right? But I think then from the other side of things, that's where folks need to make that decision. In what environment do I best thrive? Because I think right now you have situations where you have people going into work from home type firms. demanding to be in person or wanting to be in person, or people who like being in person, and so I'm really excited about the experimentation. And we talked about there isn't going to be a one size fit all,
Right.
and it even gets more granular too, because it's hard to find 40 people, 40 lawyers, and that's just your lawyers. So you probably have a support team of another 30, 70 people who think of work the exact same way. So at least I'm excited to see how it all morphs and what comes of it.
Exactly. Me too.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
The Marine Corps JAG program is seeking highly qualified law students and attorneys to serve their country as a part of the Judge Advocate Division. This challenging path of becoming a Marine officer offers many benefits to you and your family, unparalleled professional experience, and worldwide travel opportunities. Contact your local officer selection officer, Captain Leisman, at 414-297-1933 to find out more. That's 414-297-1933.
Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up Podcast.
So I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about your volunteer endeavors. So I mentioned earlier that Kristen and I came to be acquainted in one of our volunteer positions.
Which one?
Lotus Legal Clinic.
You got like a lot.
Oh, Emil was giving me a hard time today because he was late and he's sweating and he's hot in his little tight suit. So he's giving me a hard time today. But Lotus Legal Clinic, Krista's the former president. She did an excellent job. It's really important work. So I'm curious, what led you to be involved with that organization and others? I know you also have some state bar involvement. So tell us a little about those positions. Why did you take on a leadership role? Why did you get involved in the first place?
Because I had this burning desire to do good in the world, even though I've stuck with my firm path, it really has been important to me to find other ways, other outlets for feeding that desire to try and make the world a better place. Lotus Legal Clinic is a fantastic organization. It does fantastic work supporting the rights of human trafficking survivors and survivors of domestic violence, and it's a great group, and I'm thrilled to be part of that organization and watch it grow over the last several years. And it was the first organization that asked me to be on their board. So I said yes. That's really the truthful answer of how I found my way there. And then as a leadership role too, we needed a leader, and I was happy to step up and do it. And I've learned very much from the opportunity, and it was a great time to grow as a leader and to learn about running an organization.
So I'm starting to spot a trend here. You seem to be the type of person who steps up when called upon. Is this just how you've always been? Can you trace this back to a pivotal childhood memory?
I think that is something I do. I'm a yes person. In fact, Kristen and I have talked about this before.
Yes.
We are yes people, and if I see a need, I step up. And there's a quote that I love is, if not now, when? If not me, who? And I believe in that. I believe that I have something to offer, and even if it feels a little scary sometimes, I think it's a great chance for me to serve the world and make it a better place, even if just my small corner of it.
Amazing.
I love that. I feel like that's kind of a trend amongst our guests here. That's why you take time out of your day, you're billable, to sit down and talk to us and try to pour into other attorneys or other listeners, because you do care, and you care about the profession and you care about the people, and that's important. Speaking about care and leadership, you're a wife and a mother of 2 boys, and you have this new big role, even bigger role than you already had. You mentioned to me earlier that your husband you and your husband have made the decision for him to kind of transition to more consulting and freelance work this summer, and kind of be more of a stay-at-home dad, at least for now, while you guys figure out next steps and how your workload is going to work with that. So how did you come to that decision? That's another example of trying to find our footing in our personal lives. So how did you come to that decision with your husband, and how is it working out so far?
I will say it's going fantastically well. How we got there is, we'd always kind of joked that it'd be wonderful if he could stay home. I've always been someone who loves what I do, and so I never really had any inclination to be a stay-at-home parent, a full-time parent. And so he was the logical choice if one of us were to do it. And he's a great dad, and he has always I think wanted to on some level, but I think for a while it just felt kind of scary to be that committed to, frankly, our relationship, but also our family, and to not have a separate source of income. And it made sense this year for a few reasons. He'd been at his company for a few years. He loved it there. He had a great job that he loved, but he lost his father this past spring, and he was in a new role at his company that was starting to feel like maybe it wasn't the best fit. And my younger son is going to start school in the fall. So this was really the last chance for him to have time, that much time with the kids. And so we jumped on it. It seemed like it made sense with me starting this new role as well, to have that flexibility and that freedom at home where he's taking care of the kids. He made me lunch today. It was amazing. Awesome. I feel really blessed that I have that opportunity, and that we're so privileged that we can afford to do that for a while here. And then I think in the fall, his goal is to then do some more freelance work so that he can be the frontline parent and then also be continuing his career, which he also loves.
Yeah, I think a lot of people underestimate how difficult and how expensive childcare is in this country. And, before I had children, you're looking from the outside in and you don't understand the math that goes into that, the emotion, just the pragmatism that goes into those decisions. And after experiencing it firsthand, like, oh my God, like my hats go off, especially to those who step outside of a career, because to do that, male, female, and I wish this country would do more to recognize that and to support families like that as well. But that's awesome.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Thank you to our podcast sponsor, Wilmick. Now, don't gamble with your legal malpractice coverage, because Wilmick sees your needs and raises your peace of mind. Wilmick, best bet ever.
What? You don't have an ultimate pass yet? Oh, that's a mistake. Find out why at wispar.org/ultimatepass. Are you struggling with work-life balance issues? Could you use some help addressing these challenges? WISLAP offers confidential well-being support to lawyers, judges, and law students. With trained peer volunteers, structured well-being resources, and individualized support services, WISLAP aims to foster work-life balance within the Wisconsin legal community. Find us on the web at wispar.org/wislap. Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up podcast.
So August is National Wellness Month. I know this because we tackled this topic at my last brunch. So what do you do? I wasn't invited to. Sorry. What do you do for self-care? So we talked about, this was so interesting because these brunches end up being a lot of attorneys, just because we're attorneys who host it.
Joe, we're doing our own brunch, okay?
But a lot of people were like, we can't say self-care routine because that puts pressure on us to make it a routine. Now it's work. Yeah. Some of us talked about, I do Pilates, but now I have to be the best at Pilates. That's a real true story. It's like, aren't you supposed to be doing it to decompress or for your health? So I'm curious if you have maybe we don't call it a routine, any self-care things that you do, anything for your wellness, because you have a lot on your plate right now.
I do. I've always tried to be physically active, even if it means taking a short walk during a short break during the day. I do try to work out, but as I assume most people and most listeners know, that's not always easy to do. One thing that I try really hard to do that helps ground me is almost every day I'm able to be home for dinner. Nice. And I'm usually able to close my brain down, shut down, put the work aside, and give the time between dinner and bedtime for my kids to my family. And that helps me shut off work Krista, turn on family Krista, and be there with my family and be really present in that moment and not be thinking about my email. And I check afterwards and I check back in. And if my clients need things, they know they can still reach me. And if I have something important going on, I still tell them that they can reach me. But just that ability to step away for a little while is critical for me.
All right, okay, because my wife's going to listen to this and then ask me questions like, well, she's running a whole firm of like 40 people and she could do that. What's your excuse? So maybe this is the point where you'd be like, oh, yeah, and Saturdays I work too, because I don't work on Saturdays and Sundays till 6 p.m., and that's kind of how I grind. But that's really impressive, and honestly, that's something that I would love to aspire to do soon.
And I will say it's not uncommon for me to then log back in after the kids go to bed. And it's the Saturday I worked a few hours.
You see.
So Emil's wife, it's not terribly easy.
Oh, poor Natalie. Like, she's not going to care. But so then we talk about this on, I feel like every single podcast we go back to this. Work-life balance. Is it a myth? Is it achievable? Are you close? Do you think it's a real thing?
You know, what I think is the hardest part about it for our profession is that we are in the business of serving our clients. And I am lucky that working with mostly businesses and business owners, I have clients who also generally are needing me during business hours. So I'm really lucky in that way. And because of that, I am more often able to shut off my work life a little bit in the evenings and on the weekends because, again, I'm not usually having clients hounding me on the off hours as much as some other practice areas might. And because of that, I feel like I have achieved, I don't love the phrase work-life balance, as I know you guys agree with, but I have achieved a place where I feel like I'm devoting an appropriate but large amount of my life to work while also leaving space for family time, for fun time, for community service, for all the many things that I love in life and all the many things I want to do. And it's taken me a long time, a lot of practice, but I think having good boundaries has helped me with that.
And I'm assuming you've also showed yourself a lot of grace because for a lot of people who struggle with that, it's the moments of disruptions, the sustained long moments of disruptions, and it's like, I was doing great, and I missed story time, and so work-life balance is all in discombobulation.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Help ease the financial burden of a life-changing diagnosis with critical illness coverage. State Bar of Wisconsin members can apply just by answering 3 health questions. To learn more about this coverage issued by the Prudential Insurance Company of America, visit wisbar.memberenroll.com.
Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up podcast.
Yeah, I think the key is not to expect perfection. You have a goal and you try really hard to do your best, but there are days where I've worked 14 hours and hadn't seen my kids all day. There are days that in fact, sometimes a few weeks on end where I've had just long hours. We take it in balance. Then when I'm like a big case settles, then I have a few extra days. I have that time where I'll say, you know what, I'm just not going to go in today. I'm going to have a day with my family to kind of balance that out.
I saw this stuff on Instagram. It was a talk about a professional working woman who she has a very high stress job, and she talked about how her and her spouse sort of navigate. She comes home, and they do a vibe check. It's like, hey, where you at? Like, it's like, and she's like, hey, I'm like at a 40. And just keeping those lines of communications open so that way, folks, because I think the pressures are where you're aspiring to do what you want to do, right? You want to get home at the time to do dinner and all that, and it doesn't happen. Then you don't show yourself grace. Then work's still piling on. Then you get stressed out, and then all of a sudden you're no longer in flow, so to speak. And I thought that was very useful. I mean, I'm trying to also implement that, with my own household, where like, hey, because I do drop-offs, like I just can't do drop-offs today whatsoever. And can you help me out? So it's tough out there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that grace is key. Yeah.
So rapid fire questions, something new that we've wanted to try for a while, and we're going to try it on you. You're a guinea pig for the first time
Excellent.
On the podcast.
Bring it on.
Drum roll.
So basically, I want you to try to answer these questions as quickly as possible. Don't think too hard about them. So besides this podcast, favorite podcast?
Freakonomics.
Freakonomics, that's a good one. Okay, last book that you read?
I read Yes, Please by Amy Poehler.
Very good. Summerfest or Jazz in the Park?
Jazz in the Park.
And best advice for young lawyers and other listeners?
Oh, I tell you, that's one of the hardest ones. I would say sometimes you need to tune out all the advice that you're given. And I'm not saying don't listen to it. Don't, you still want to be exposed to it, but sometimes you need to pick and choose which ones to listen to so you can still be true to yourself.
That's fabulous advice.
I love it. In fact, I'm going to tell my mom that. I have an African mom. She's giving me advice all over my life.
Let's see how well that goes over.
Yeah. Her favorite parable is, and I'll say it in pidgin, which is broken English, and I'll say it in English. And it says, "Waiting adult they see sitting down, bikini official for tree," and it goes, "What a grown-up sees sitting down, and a baby can't see it standing on a tree." That's usually the caveat before the advice.
Got it.
You better take the advice. So I'm like, you know what, Mom? I'm just going to tune you out.
But I love that, though. That's good advice. Mom's not wrong. I like that advice. Christa, this has been so awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time, giving us grace for our technical difficulties. No fault of Joe, all on us. And thank you. You've been awesome. I'm so impressed with you.
Thank you very much.
You were an excellent leader with Lotus, so it's just been so nice to know you. And I really am looking forward to see you continue to ascend. I don't know how much more you can send at that firm, but I know you're going to do amazing things for it. So
We're still managing shareholder, which someday maybe.
We'll be rooting for you from here. Thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you have a topic you'd like us to explore, let us know. I'm your host, Emil, Ovbiagele, and we'll catch you next time.